what is Northwest Nerd? It's the collector whose pop culture passion took him along an unlikely path to becoming an ordained Jedi minister.
I wish I was, say, of a diabolical genius that I was going to start this Star Wars church. Not at all.
It's the tea blender who can actually taste fandom.
I make tea for nerds, and that is weirdly a real job a person can have.
These are the stories that make us nerds. This is Northwest Nerd.
Hey, welcome to the Sartorial Geek Podcast. I am Jordan today, and I'm here with Kosi Harris, who does public relations and all kinds of great publicity things. Hi, Kosi. How are you?
Hey, Jordan. How are you?
Good, good. I'm so excited because we're doing this series on our podcast right now, helping small, or I guess even not only small businesses, and talking a little bit about the behind the scenes of things, which we haven't really done before. And we have never talked about PR on this podcast before. So I'm really excited.
Oh, that's hella dope.
Yeah, I'm so excited to talk to an expert. Well, I guess first, do you want to explain a little bit about like what you do and your job in PR?
I've been doing PR for about 12 years now. Want to do it since I was about 17. From like a job shadowing day that I did in high school way back when. And I ended up being paired up with a publicist from CoverGirl. And I had no clue what PR was up to that point. And she explained to me what it was, you know, like what she does, basically promoting the CoverGirl brand into publications, getting it product placement on TV and movies. And I just fell in love with it because I think at that time I didn't know what I wanted to do. And again, like it still changes. And at the time I just wanted to do just like beauty and fashion PR, you know, which is great. But obviously we can get to that later. That changes over time, as it should when you get older, right?
Right.
That's growth. But I really was like, okay, that's what I want to do. And basically publicity is to be seen by other people, obviously, in public, used to bring more brand recognition. A brand, a company, a person. It's more about awareness of something. It could be used as a selling tactic, which we could talk about later, but it's usually another way to get sales, not the only main way to get sales if a brand is interested in that.
We've worked together before, and that's something that I didn't like totally understand. The marketing and PR work together, but they are not the same thing in the sense that like PR does not include, it's I guess one part of marketing, but it's not your entire marketing campaign, I guess, unless that's all you're doing, but it usually should be coupled with other things.
Yeah. And I always think that marketing should be first. It's basically just like promoting and selling products or services. And that's including like, you know, using advertising, research. So marketing is usually just focused on selling a specific product, where PR is focused on, like I said, recognition and just maintaining a positive reputation for a company, a person, a product as a whole.
Yeah. You say marketing should come first. Is that sort of like if a company is, or a brand or business is smaller, do you recommend like figuring out their marketing campaign first and then adding in PR once they sort of have a little more of an idea of what their marketing strategy is?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And also too, a lot of marketing tactics are free, right? I mean, we know advertising is part of that, but I would even do advertising sometimes before doing PR, only because PR could take time. And if a brand is looking, or a company is looking for more like fast sales, I would recommend PR to being the one to do it, especially now in this climate where, you know, the news changes every day and they might have to either delay a story or even sometimes pull a story, which happened to me a few months ago because they just didn't have the time to include, and they just had to catch up with more current news or more products that are more appropriate for this time. And, you know, that's the name of the game right now.
Yeah, I guess that's another thing I hadn't really thought about, because marketing, like you have a little bit more, like the brand has a little bit more control over it, I guess, in the sense that like you kind of put out your own marketing, or if you're getting help with that, that's more internal. But PR and publicity really is reliant on other sources to like post your story or put you on TV.
Yes, for sure.
I didn't even think about that like in a sort of chaotic time. I bet all of that is a lot harder because, yeah, like you have to plan. Like you said, PR takes a while. It's because you have to like work with someone else so much in advance to get things out, right?
For sure. for sure. Or sometimes it was immediate. I remember I promoted Sartorial Geek when it first came out, and, those were more simpler times back then. We got more media interest, immediately.
Yeah, I guess that's true. And it probably depends on the size of the company that you're working with too, or not the company, but like the size of the blogs or newspapers or magazines.
Yes. And I remember during that time, we kind of decided, I figured you and me, that we were going to go much more niche.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just targeting all just like the geek publications we know. And then we did more of like the mainstream. Like I remember we sent product to BuzzFeed. You remember that didn't come out until like 2 months later.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing for people to remember when they're thinking about PR. That is definitely something to plan in advance, because I don't know how many people necessarily think about that. It's like you really need time.
Yeah, it really takes time. And also, too, it depends on the story. Like there's a few Facebook groups that I'm in where editors will mention about what they need. And times like for experts, they need something like yesterday, which is hysterical. But they also, when they do these deadlines, doesn't mean that it will come out the next day. I remember there was a deadline that was due like within 3 hours. I didn't see the placement until 6 weeks.
Okay.
And that's the earliest. Sometimes it can be a month or two. Again, if like there's delays or an editor is deciding to push it back, you just have to wait and manage like the client's expectations of that.
That makes a lot of sense. So like if someone is running a brand and they have their marketing figured out and they're thinking about adding PR, is there anything you recommend to people who are doing PR for the first time, if just to kind of understand like when it's useful to them? Or do you recommend that they have like only do it around like new launches? Or is there anything like that you like try to recommend that people think about before they start thinking about PR?
Oh, yes, for sure. I feel as though any brand or person should be thinking about like their 60, 90, 120 goals and figure out what like where are they planning to achieve and how PR could fit in that way. I would figure out your budget if you do want to hire a PR firm. And I also would recommend, particularly for some small businesses, that they wait like a year or two, because there's a lot of times there's other ways to get PR, right? There's a service called HARO, that's short for Help a Reporter. And that's a way that you could get leads any day, and a small business or person could do that. And they could start vetting. You'll get emails every day, basically on a bunch of topics that could be, that could be helpful in regards to like getting press a lot. And that's how a lot of media on the low will get like sources and things like that. And they'll want to like blast it out, and they'll give deadlines for particular stories that they need or products that they need. And it's free. But it is hit or miss sometimes. But then sometimes like you'll see like a Forbes editor looking for something, or someone from like BuzzFeed or Cosmopolitan. So I think that's a cool way to test the waters to see what you want. I would also think about just where do you see yourself placed realistically? Like writing down like your top 10 or 15, blogs, podcasts, publications, influencers you want to see wearing the product too. Because I feel as though, again, social media and PR could go hand in hand, right? So I think that's another way to think about that. Just basically knowing what you're trying to achieve in advance, like we talked about. Yeah, and also understanding too that this is a way to get a sale. It's not the only way. So you're still going to have to do some marketing tactics. And also that helps PR in a way. Like I always recommend like businesses, whether big or small, make sure they have some social media presence. This doesn't mean having 10K followers, but you should be posting every day for an editor to see that.
Yeah. And I think having a big story come out definitely can be game changing in some ways. Like this was way, way, way long ago, like maybe almost 10 years ago, I had a product in Real Simple magazine, which was like back when I only had an Etsy shop, and that completely changed the game for me. But then I've also had other like stories come out that I thought would be a huge deal, and like it wasn't really. So I think that's also something for people to think about, that not like there's so much more to business and sales than like expecting one story to completely change everything just by itself. Because like you said, I think a lot of it is getting a story and then having a way for all of the new leads that come in to keep following you or keep up with your business, because they're not necessarily all just going to like shop that one day instantly. Like, I guess that's just sort of an expectation. It can be game changing, but not every single story is going to like completely change your business.
Exactly. Even, like you mentioned that Real Simple hit, but you kept going. You knew that wasn't going to be like the end all be all. And I think that's a thing that brands need to think about as well. Like you should be leveraging that, like putting that into like newsletters and any type of social media campaigns, or if you're at trade shows mentioning, oh yeah, have you seen us in Real Simple? So I feel as though a lot of brands don't do that. They kind of just like depend on like the online placement, call it a day. It's like, no, you're going to have to sell that now. That's a marketing tactic. Like, hey, did you see us here? Like, are you having signs like in your store or on your website as seen in Real Simple? And I feel as though a lot of brands are not taking that extra step. They're just depending on like, and then that's supposed to just change everything. Where I see, Jordan, what you do, like you literally post it everywhere. You have a press section on your website. I feel as though brands have to think about that. They need to go the extra mile.
I think this is a really good like reminder that PR can absolutely be a way to elevate what you're doing. But if you're counting on it to be the only thing that's like getting you sales, it needs to be a part of a bigger strategy and not just one thing. Because I'm sure even as the person doing PR, that must be frustrating when you have a client that doesn't totally get it, where like, I guess it's what you said before, just setting expectations of what is possible. And it's absolutely a great way to get your product in front of new eyes and bigger audiences. But yeah, I think it still has to be a part of a bigger strategy.
Oh, for sure.
You talked about like you've worked at, I guess, bigger companies, but you're doing freelance PR now too, which is super cool.
Yes, I fell to that by accident. And it's ironic because I feel as though a lot of the work that I get now is really a lot of word of mouth, which is like really, really flattering. And I'll be transparent, it was like a bit overwhelming that happened like within like a year and a half. Like I always had like a freelance stuff for myself. But again, with like, the pandemic, you're doing more stuff on your own. So I'm just writing with it. And I'm very, very grateful. I have amazing clients that I love doing great work for. One of them is Basami Cosmetics.
So cool. I love that brand.
Right? Yeah. Just Gabriella is amazing. I work with a influencer that does a lot of amazing social good content. She also is a disability advocate. Her name is Gigi Robinson. I do nonprofit work for Real Sis Film Festival, Image Nation, and Trade Association of America. And in the wellness space, I work for a line called Blossom and Stone, which is a small business that launched last year. And that's cool seeing that grown, that got them placements in Birdie, Pop Sugar. And I'm just kind of running with that.
That's so cool. If someone is looking to hire PR, like, do you have any suggestions for how to find a publicist that is like a good fit for you?
Sure. So I think I would also, again, like writing down a list of goals, just like thinking about like, how do you communicate with employees or like outside vendors if you don't have like employees and you just hire freelancers? That's one. Think about your budget. And then also too, I would be on social media, networking and figuring out that's how I met Gabriella. Like she found me through a female founder group that we were on Facebook and someone referred me.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I think those social media groups are very valuable. And this is one time that social media works. And then also like talking to friends, talking to family. I think that's old fashioned too. I feel as the word of mouth, especially right now, I think it's just essential. I think people want to have some sort of sense of security. And I think, the whole word of mouth route is a way to do that without like feeling so uncertain, right?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know that you mentioned a couple ways to do this already, but do you have any other, like, if someone is listening and they're like, okay, I would love to hire a publicist at some point or a PR rep at some point, but I know that I'm not ready yet. So they're working on their marketing. And I know you mentioned, was it called Harrow, the website?
Yeah, Harrow.
Are there any other suggestions you have for people to sort of, like, if they want to try to do their own PR to start?
For sure. So I think also, Google Alerts are amazing. Think about where your competitors are being placed at.
Smart.
Yeah, start creating your own media list, so to speak, which means just using an Excel sheet, looking, putting a link to your competitor's publication or something similar to it where you think you would want to be placed at, getting the editor's information, which means Googling them, following them on Twitter, on Instagram, LinkedIn. And I know for publicists, like a lot of editors don't like when they get DM'd, but I think business owners, especially right now, they're more welcoming to it. So I would take advantage of that. like DMing them just like, hey, I would love to send you a product, or I would like to tell you my story. How can I email you? What can they do? If they ignore you, then fine, you move on. Go to the next one.
I feel like that's maybe one of the biggest, at least I've done like my own very, very small bits of PR. And I feel like that's maybe one of the biggest things is like, it's okay when people say no to you or don't respond. And that just like has to be a part of the mentality. Like not everyone is going to get back to you saying yes. And that's totally fine.
Right. Especially right now too. I think people need to remember that, but like writer, like a lot of publications, there's layoffs. There was just layoffs in, I think Huffington Post last week. So a lot of editors now are doing the jobs of two people.
Oh yeah.
And I think, they're overwhelmed just as we are with work and what's going on in the world. So I think that's just something to be mindful of too. Like if, it's no excuse for being snippy, but there's times they just won't get back to you. And if there's snippy, like it's not you, maybe it's a deadline. Like I'm kind of amazed to see like the writers that I know, like I know they work on with multiple publications and how much they're getting done. And not getting paid as much money for it too, because, advertising's kind of down the toilet a bit too right now.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't even really think about like until you said that there is a lot of crazy stuff happening. Like a lot of the writers I knew who were writing at the beginning of the pandemic are not writing at the same place anymore. Like there have been a lot of shifts. I didn't even think about how much that's affecting things like PR.
Yeah, I'm actually pretty shocked that it's still happening. I kind of thought we were clearing through that, but apparently we're not.
Yeah, so I guess maybe just, I think it's always good to go into conversations with like a little extra kindness and grace, but maybe now especially.
Oh, for sure. Definitely for sure. Because I'm in a few of these like PR groups that on Facebook. So I hear a lot of these editors, what they're venting about, it's pretty interesting. Like they don't want to be reminded 3 times about an email. They'll reply if they want to, things like that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like sending one reminder, like one follow-up is probably okay, but then let it go.
Exactly.
I feel like that's another piece of advice I heard like at some point in my small business journey is like to maybe not have your heart set. You should definitely have goals, but like don't put all of your eggs in like one basket. And like if you want to get into a certain publication and they're saying no for now, don't like hound them until they say yes, because that's not the way to do it. Like you'll need to change your strategy or come back when you have a bigger audience
or talk to another person.
True. Yeah.
There's a lot of freelancers on Twitter, and that's another good way to find media contacts. And also, I know a lot of writers do post when they're looking for sources.
That makes sense.
Which is great. So I think that's a good way. Twitter is also a good resource to have.
I just thought of this, but do you suggest people sort of try out their own, like try out PR for themselves before hiring someone? Because I do feel like you learn a lot and learn how much hard work it is by trying it yourself.
You know what, Jordan? I think they should. Just to, get understanding of like obviously what a publicist deals with, but also like they get an idea of like what they really want.
I feel like that makes a lot of sense to, if you're thinking about going this route and you're not in a time crunch where you're like, I want to hire someone right now, like maybe try it out for yourself a little bit. I know the holiday season is coming up. Like that's probably a great time for a lot of products.
Yeah, it's now.
Yeah. So maybe, try it out for yourself and see, because it is like, I have a new appreciation for PR after I have tried it myself. And in some ways it's worked and in some ways it hasn't. And it is grueling. Like it is a lot of rejection and a lot of not now and a lot of like sending 1,000 emails and getting, 10 responses. And that's not for the faint of heart. It's a hard job.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
I hope this is like, is there anything else that you think people should know about PR? I feel like this has been a good intro to and like helping people navigate when's the right time for them.
I think people understand, like, again, like PR brings brand credibility, and it definitely bridged the gap between like businesses and like would be clients and customers. I think that's something that small businesses should consider too. Just the whole credibility factor.
Yeah. I think you can also just do PR for like a certain season or a certain product, right? Like it's not necessarily as much of an ongoing thing as marketing should be.
Right, for sure. Because obviously a lot of editors will ask, what's the new news? I remember I got that like 8 years ago, this trade editor from Women's Wear Daily said that to me, and it always stuck with me because she was kind of just like, and I was happy that she said that to me because she didn't need to. She could have just ignored me, right?
Yeah. But I think that's a good thing for businesses to think about. Like, if you don't have something new out, it's going to be a lot harder to pitch a story if you don't really have anything to talk about.
Right. And then during that time, that's when you think about just, again, where are the goals for like the next, where are your goals after this PR campaign, right?
I think, I hope this is really helpful for businesses, especially now leading into at least this holiday season. But if you're listening in the future, there's always a good time to think about publicity and PR. And can you let everyone know where they can find you and contact you if they're possibly interested in working with you?
Yes, I'm on Instagram under Kosi Harris altogether. And on LinkedIn, just Google Kosi Harris, and on Twitter at Kosi27.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kosi. This has been so helpful. And now I'm like motivated I was like, oh, my media list that I made, I think probably 7 years ago is so old and outdated. I should really think about updating some of my stuff. So this has been very motivating for me.
Oh, I love that I motivated you.
Yes. Thank you so much. And I hope that people reach out if they're interested in working with you. And I hope everyone has a better understanding of PR. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Jordan.
Thank you so much for listening to our episode. If you want to hear more like this, you can subscribe to the Sartorial Geek podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you want to help us out, you can leave us a rating or a review or head to patreon.com/sartorialgeek. Thank you so much. Have a great day.